Why didn't Kinjaku just straight up take out Gojo here? He was trapped, defenseless, without any access to cursed energy. He was a sitting duck. So why trap him instead of just getting rid of the problem permanently? Well, we're going to talk about that and a bunch of other questions straight from you guys. All right, so first up, we've got this Prison Realm question from Roko. And Roko is an anime only, so let me just say that to answer this question, I technically have to dip into some manga spoiler stuff, but it's not a big moment, it's not a big spoiler, it's just some background information, some historical lore, if you will. So I'm sure you'd be fine with that considering you asked this question to begin with, but just in case anybody doesn't want to know, this is your chance to get on out. So, to answer this question, it revolves around the fact that Gojo has the six eyes. And something we learn about six eyes is that only one person can have it at a time. So, the fact that Gojo has six eyes and limitless is what makes him as powerful as he is, right? That's why Kinjaku is trying to get him out of the picture and sealing him in the prison realm. So, if Kinjaku were to just take out Gojo in this moment, that opens up the door for another Six Eyes user to come around because Gojo's gone. If Gojo's just sealed, he still has the Six Eyes, right? So no new Six Eyes user will come around because there already is one. Next up, we got this question from Zafar on why does Kinjaku's brain have a mouth? And great question. I wish I could provide you a better answer, but we simply don't know. I mean, I think it's just a stylistic choice from Gege, to show that this guy with the body swapping technique, this is how his brain looks. So I'm sure it's some function of that technique, but we really don't have any concrete answers. Next up, we got a couple of questions from Draco. The first being, do I think the Disaster Curse's new geto was actually Kinjaku? And I don't. The first reason is what you bring up here, the fact that they call him Geto, right? There's no reason for them to use a fake name and not just call him Kinjaku. Maybe when they're out and about, sure, but we've seen a bunch of scenes of them behind closed doors. It's just them, even in Dagon's domain, so nobody's listening, right? And they still call him Geto. So I think Kinjaku just didn't trust them with that information. Plus, there was no reason for him to tell them, right? So why reveal anything about himself that could even potentially compromise him, right? They were just using each other. Kinjaku was using them, but they were also using him. So they were just working toward their, mutually beneficial goals and only kind of revealing what they needed to each other. And your second question is, how would Jogo's plan have even worked? If they took out all of the humans, then no new cursed spirits would be born, right? And this is speaking to Jogo's dream of having curses inherit the earth, for curses to be the new humanity. However, if that were to take place, no new curses could be born. So I would say that Jogo probably just didn't really think about the nuance of this, or maybe he didn't understand the product of that would be that no new curses are born, or maybe he just didn't care. But I do follow the logic that if all humans were gone, then there would probably be no more cursed spirits. However, there probably are just already a whole lot. So maybe it's just we'll party with the ones we got, Next up, we got this question from Anton on what's up with Laro, who is the guy that has hearts for areolas, and the rest of Geto's old followers that we briefly see during Season 2. So, as we obviously know, they followed Geto, which means they were on board for the plan of getting rid of all of non-sorcerers in order to get rid of curses, right? But now that Geto's gone, they're kind of arguing about, do we follow this new guy, aka Kinjaku? And they're kind of fighting about it, right? So we don't really know too much about what they ultimately decide to do, other than the fact that we see Laro kind of swoop in during that final fight in Season 2 to help the good guys, to help Yuki. So Laro is kind of on board with Yuki's mission now, which, similar to Geto, is to rid the world of curses. She was the one that even kind of gave him the idea of, if you wipe out all non-sorcerers, curses aren't a problem anymore, right? Or, if you make everyone a sorcerer and able to control their cursed energy, there's no more sorcerers anymore. So Laro has kind of fallen in line with Yuki. As for the rest of them, it's hard to say because they haven't really gotten any screen time. Then as far as Miguel, he actually helped train Akotsu, like we saw at the end of Jujutsu Kaisen 0 when they were talking to one another. But that's also where Akotsu has been. He's been in Africa during the events of Season 1 and Season 2 when he hasn't been around. He's been over there with Miguel. Alrighty, y'all, I've got some more Kinjaku questions, but we're going to start dipping into manga spoiler territory. So before we go there, I want to answer two final anime-friendly questions. The first one is from Jaden, who wants to know, who is the girl with white hair? So I assume you're talking about Uraume, who is the girl that shows up after Sukuna fights Jogo and is kneeling before him, right? Now, I can't answer this to its full extent without giving spoilers, but essentially all you need to know is it's somebody who serves Sukuna. So presumably somebody that would have known him from way back when. Then the second question down here is from Shrimp, and they want to know if I could talk about Hanami's domain expansion. So there actually is information we know about this domain thanks to an interview Gege did a while back. So I actually had talk about this in another video. So Shrimp, I'm going to link it down in the YouTube comments below. But if you're not watching me on YouTube, shoot me a DM and I'll send you a direct link. Alrighty, up next we got two questions from CJ, and the first of which is actually still anime friendly, but the second and all the rest of the questions in this video will not be, so this is your final warning. So this first question is about how Kinjaku is actually jumping from body to body. CJ thinks that he must infect people's brains rather than transplanting the brain because he still has access to the host's curse technique, which as we know is engraved on the brain. So wouldn't that have to be the case? And I'm totally with you on your logic here because that's what you would think. But Kenjaku actually tells us different. During the Shibuya incident, he's talking about how he still has access to the host's memories just from being in their body. And he's doing this during like the philosophical discussion with Mahito on like what comes first, the soul or the body. And so Kinjaku makes a point of saying that like, even though I don't have their brain, I still have access to their memories and their curse technique just from the body. And the language a couple times in the manga is this curse technique engraved on my body. Like I think Gojo says that during his awakening. So even though you're right, the curse technique we know to be in a certain part of the brain, it is also technically in the body somehow. So I do think Kinjaku himself is that brain, and the brain is transplanting. However, that might not be the case. But again, just based on what he says during that Shibuya conversation, that's the implication that's there. And then for your second question about Sukuna not utilizing his full potential yet, I mean, absolutely. It's been said a couple of times, and especially in the most recent chapter, Uruume tells us that he's like not taking things seriously. And to speak to the specific thing you're talking about, that binding vow of revealing your curse technique to amp it up, yeah, Sukuna hasn't done that. Now, I don't know that we'll necessarily see him do that. I do think we will probably just to get the reveal of what his curse technique is, and the best way to do that narratively would be to have Sukuna explain it, but it's at least possible that the narrator might explain it. And I only say that because I don't necessarily see Sukuna like wanting to get that power up unless he like really is being challenged and like really is going all out, then maybe he will do that binding vow. Next up in this same vein of Sukuna kicking things up a notch or taking things seriously, we've got this question from Bleach Moon asking about Sukuna and black flashes. So I definitely think Sukuna is fully aware of what a black flash is and has performed them. Because as we're told, sorcerers that have done a black flash versus those that haven't are on completely different levels. So can you even imagine a Sukuna that has never done a black flash that then does, he's just going to get even more powerful? Like that's absolutely ludicrous, right? So I think he's absolutely done them, he knows about them, and we might see him pull one out here if he starts taking things seriously. And then for your comment about white flashes, like the same thing but using positive cursed energy, I think that's a really cool idea, and at least conceptually I don't know why it wouldn't exist. But that being said, I doubt we see it at this point in the story. While we're on the subject of Sukuna and Kinjaku, how about a little versus matchup brought to us by Belted, who wants to know 15-finger Sukuna versus Kinjaku. And Sukuna absolutely slams. And we know this, one, because Sukuna and Gojo are just on another level compared to everybody else, right? But we also specifically know this because right after Gojo gets unsealed, when Sukuna is still at 15-finger level, he teleports right on over to Kenny, right? And he says, "What's up? What are your last words, homie?" And Kinjaku is like terrified, but Sukuna jumps in, right? And we know that they have some binding vow where Sukuna is protecting Kinjaku from Gojo. And again, he's at 15 fingers level of strength here. So clearly he way outscales Kinjaku at that level as well. While we're on the subject, I've got this question from Bakari on if Gojo could have beaten Kinjaku, Uruume, and 15-finger Sukuna right after he got unsealed. So like we were just talking about, Kinjaku and Uruume are just fodder to Gojo, right? So they wouldn't have even really made a difference. This basically boils down to Gojo versus 15-finger Sukuna. And it's so hard to quantify what 5 fingers does to Sukuna. Obviously, it makes him way stronger, but he has his full toolkit even without those last 5, right? He still has 10 shadows, he still has Maharaga. So I think the fight honestly plays out pretty similarly to the one we saw. However, again, it's impossible to quantify because maybe those 5 fingers make his domain less refined, which means Gojo just wins the domain, right? So if that's how it works, then Gojo slams. But if it's not, then it's probably pretty similar to the fight we actually saw. Finally, we got this question from D-Money on if Kenny took over Gojo's body, do I think he would use it better than Gojo did? And honestly, no, I don't, because Kenny is no slouch, but obviously neither is Gojo. I think Gojo put the work in and got the full use out of those techniques. Plus, Gojo had a lifetime to get used to the 6 eyes.